Mark Shean, welcome to Wolfden.
It's good to be here, Rich.
Now, we just finished the Spring Carnival basically on Saturday. The last of the Group 1s were out of the way. It was a great Spring Carnival. I'm sure you enjoyed it. And you've been one of the more respected judges in the great game for a long time now. And I just wanted to start by talking to you about a few of the better performers over the springtime that you think will go on to bigger and better things in the autumn, and also that you're probably looking forward to backing in the autumn. I thought we'd break it down. We'd do 3 horses, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old and an older horse. Can we start with the 2-year-old? I know it's a little hard because it's very early in the 2-year-old season, but was there a 2-year-old that sort of impressed you and you're looking forward to maybe having a long-range bet on the slipper or something like that?
Well, look, you're right. There hasn't been a lot of races yet, and there haven't been many trial either. They're becoming later and later every year. So, look, it's Captain Obvious at the moment. The Shangri-La Express is. I think he's being ridden upside down personally.
Really?
Look, they're driving him mad to go to the front, and he's been a bit fizzy in the yard as well. So, I personally would think that in the long run he'd be better off with a trail. But they're getting the job done.
Yeah.
But look, there's a lot of water under the bridge yet. A lot of horses to come before slipper time.
And you're very involved in 2-year-olds, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about that a bit later in the podcast, especially your affiliation with James Harrow and Bloodstock. But if we move on from the 2-year-olds to now, and the 3-year-olds, it starts to get a bit easier to put the puzzles together somewhat. What did you make of the 3-year-old crop over the spring?
Look, I think there's one sleeper there is Celestial Legend for me.
Okay.
This horse, look, it was a strange preparation. I can't believe they didn't go to the Coolmore with him. They gave him 2 runs at Rose Hill where he just got lost around the circle. He didn't finish all that far behind King's Gambit and Osmosis, and both runs he was hitting the line really well. I thought that he just wasn't suited at Rose Hill, even though he'd won there, but he'd won a 2-year-old race against lacklustre opposition. But I thought he was certainly worth a crack down the straight, but Les just gave him the 2 runs and put him away. So I think for the autumn, he might be the one that's sort of flying under the radar a little bit.
And if you were in charge of his preparation over the autumn, is there a particular race that you'd like to put him in?
Oh, look, he'd be going for all the major 3-year-old races. The sprint races anyway. I'm not sure what he's going to aim him at. He's obviously got something in mind to give him a light spring and then aim him for the autumn next year.
And he's got a huge opinion of him, doesn't he, Les Bridge?
Well, I think so. He's cuddled him, so he must have thought that he's got something in the tank for later on. But as I said, I had something. I went in the Coolmore. I got my money back because it was pre-noms. But I thought he was worth a crack down the straight anyway.
Yeah. What about the older horses? A lot of horses stood up.
Yeah, I'm not. Look, I'm a bit more focused on the 2 and 3-year-olds to tell you the truth. I did have a peanut on the Melbourne Cup winner that were without a fight. Like I'd been overseas when he won in. Through the winter, but I came back and did the videos and was very impressed with him. So I managed to have something on him, but I didn't back many other winners in Melbourne, I must say.
Yeah, it was a difficult carnival. We got absolutely pumped. Very good. Okay, so moving on from that, so just a bit of a quick background of how you sort of got into it all. I guess you had no choice but to get into horse racing because your family had a pretty long tradition in horse racing. Did your grandfather rode a Caulfield Cup winner?
My grandfather, Fred, 1938, he rode the Caulfield Cup, Melbourne Cup and the Williamstown Cup, which is the equivalent of the Sandown Cup. Mm-hmm. He won those 3 races on 3 different horses.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Which was
all
amazing.
In 1 year or?
Same year, 1938.
Yeah.
He won the Epsom at Randwick as well. He won the Oaks in 38. He had a magical year in 38. So he was one of the leading riders in Sydney, and 3 different horses won the Melbourne Cup on catalogue, led most of the way, and an 8-year-old, he was the oldest horse to win the Cup for many years.
Yeah. But here comes Bourbon now, threading his way through the field into about 6th place and stretching out, but the leader is still Catalogue. Yes, the 25-to-1 shot is flying away from the field. There goes Bourbon setting out after Catalogue now, but Catalogue has it sewn up, and although Bourbon finishes fast, Catalogue goes on to win by 3 lengths from Bourbon. Hotel Star fights it out for 3rd place with the Lunga, who finishes 4th. So New Zealand springs another surprise, and the 8-year-old Catalogue, the oldest horse in the race, rises from obscurity to win one of the world's greatest turf classics, the Melbourne Cup.
Yeah, and what was your relationship like with him? Did you learn a lot about the racing game off him?
Well, he got pretty old at the finish where, he'd go to the races, but no, I wasn't learning off him as such. I was going to the races on my Pat Malone when I was about 13. I'd get the train to Rose Hill or go to Randwick. We'd after school we'd get a cab out and go into the flat at Randwick for midweeks.
And were your parents involved in racing?
Parents were SPing actually. They
Yeah.
had a couple of pubs in the Redfern area, to tell the truth. My mum's father and mother managed the Duke of Norfolk in Cleveland
pub.
Street.
Yeah, it goes good these days.
So they managed that, and then
Wow.
they got involved in SP in a couple of pubs in the Redfern area.
Yeah.
We were actually living in a housing commission at Redfern.
Yeah.
Next minute, we were looking over Tamarama Beach. So they kicked a bit of a
Seriously?
goal. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So
That's incredible. So you think that they won enough SPing to go and
SP
buy one of the better
SPing
joints
was
down in
strong,
Tamarama?
yeah.
And it's still the
well, my
the
mum
house is-
passed away a couple of years ago, but Dad's still there. So yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. And we're going to talk a bit about Mark Reed later on, but his relationship with his mum Mabel Reed, they were betting huge. Was that similar to your mum? Was she betting in really big numbers?
Mum was a big punter. She loved everything 2-up. She'd go to the 2-up games.
Yeah, in all the clubs. Yeah,
Well, no, there were 2-up games around the city at that time. With
Yeah.
the legal.
Yeah, the
she'd-
illegal
she'd
gaming
go-
clubs, yeah.
She'd go to those. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was just a desperate punter.
Yeah.
She really was. Pokies. She'd give the lot a go.
Yeah,
but she was a winner. I don't know. She just had an uncanny knack of winning. So she was more the driving force than the old man. I know that.
Did she do the form, or was she well informed?
She did the form. She did the form, but being an SPing, you'd see a bit of money coming as well, and she talked to a lot of people. Eventually, she got out of the SPing with the coppers were getting a bit too, they were a bit hot move. Beck came in, but they started doing the prices service they'd ring the SP bookies with the fluctuations. So they did that for a couple of years as well. So and then got out of the game. So it was getting a bit tough for the SPs.
And Mark Reed tells a great story that when he used to go to the races with his mum Mabel Reed, they'd take 50,000 cash. Did your mum ever lob at the races with that kind of money?
Certainly not in that respect.
Not that
no.
sphere. Yeah, fair enough. So you said you were going out the track at 13 and whatnot. At what age did you decide I want to make this my career?
Look, I wanted to be a race caller from when I was about 10, I reckon. I just loved the races. As I said, I'd go every opportunity that I could. I would start practicing at school holidays. I'd go to the barrier trials and get a spare box and call the 2-year-old trials, all the other trials that were on. So, yeah, I wanted to call and I wanted to be in racing. So, yeah,
And was Ken Howard at the top of the game then, or?
Ken Howard was just there at that time. Jeff Marnie was the guy who got me my first job. Without a fluke, it was just a fluke that a guy from Beacon Hill came to Waverley College where I was going to school, and his parents were great friends with Jeff Marnie. So Mark and I teamed up together. We were going to the races together. I used to give Jeff the tapes and go up and watch the couple of races in his box on occasion, and just it sort of came from that. Yeah.
And how old were you at this age?
Probably about 13, 14.
Okay,
I got
so
my
very young.
first job calling. He got me a job calling in the bush when I was 16, so I was still at school.
Yeah.
I used to fly up on the weekends.
And was Ken Howard? He sort of gets talked about in great reverence. Was he? Did he inspire you to become a caller?
Not particularly, no. I think Ken Howard was more a radio caller though, because he was more theatre. I don't know that he would have actually survived in the TV era,
Right.
Because he was coming at 100 mile an hour, but it was still 5 lengths away. It was all a lot of theatre for him.
Sure.
More than accuracy.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not saying he wasn't accurate.
No.
I'm just saying that he pumped up his calls to be that big booming sort of finish and all that sort of stuff that the TV wise might not have sort of stood the test of time.
So you had ambitions to be a caller, but there was a long, long time before you actually became, a significant caller. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, well, I got a job with. I called in the bush. I called at Inverell and Glen Ennis. Used to go there on the weekend. Then I got a job at Bathurst and Orange.
And when you were calling, were you just calling for patrons on course, or was it also being broadcast on radio and television?
They were on course, and then I got a job Kembla Newcastle 2GB. That was for radio.
Yeah.
But then 2GB shut down all their sport and they went talk back. So Johnny Tapp was out of a job. I was understudy to Johnny Tapp. Well, not really understudy, but I was doing the provincials. And so we were out of a job. So after that, I got a job with Bob Charlie.
Yeah.
Bob Charlie picked me up after that. I was doing the midweek barrier trials. I was doing the comments for him.
So you're not calling anymore. You've gone and you've started working
Yeah.
for a pro punter.
Yeah.
And I just want to stop you there. So Bob Charlie was part of the Legal Eagles,
Yeah.
correct? First question is, What were the legal eagles? Like my generation, we hear about them a lot. We don't know much about them. Can you tell us a bit more about them? And also, so Don Scott, who's a bit of a mythical character in our game these days, was part of the legal eagles, correct?
Don Scott was the main man in the legal eagles, but like I was only really a kid, but and I was outside, not in the members. I think a lot of them were in the members, but I remember Clive Everett. I think it was Clive Everett. He was the runner outside, putting the money on in the outer ring. He had about a size 16 shoe, and if you saw him coming, you certainly got out of his way. He'd push old ladies out of the way and everything. He just wanted to get on.
Yeah.
And if you saw him coming, as I said, you'd just run for your life.
So when you worked for Bob Charlie, he'd moved on from the legal eagles era, is that right?
Well, he seemed to be out on his own. He was doing more. He was doing the midweeker, and he was doing his own publication, which was like you'd buy the publication, which had like racing comments, also the barrier trial stuff for the week. So, and I was doing some stuff with him for that.
And did you learn a lot from that? Did you sort of start to become a winning punter then?
Well, he had this was all pre-internet day, so every horse had a card. So I was doing cards on the Monday. It was quite laborious stuff, but you'd see patterns in horses, and they were rating them and put the cards back in and get them out for each race, all that sort of stuff. So, as I said, a bit laborious, but eventually you saw things happening with horses if they were good, fresh, whatever. Different colour codes for different tracks, all that sort of stuff.
So there's no computers?
No computers.
What year?
at
Is
that
this like
stage.
early 80s or something we're talking? Or?
Very much early 80s,
Yeah. And you sort of mentioned the trials. You were going to the trials a lot around this time, were you? Was that a big part of what you did for Bob Charlie?
Yes, I did the comments for the barrier trials for him. And then the AJC and the STC asked me to call the trials on course as well. So,
And was there a big edge in the trials? I heard you in another podcast say that you'd find a horse and the bookies would put up 6-1. In today's world, they put that same horse up at 6-4 because the edge that you had around the trials then doesn't exist anymore.
trials were fantastic for me.
Yeah.
And they weren't really thought of as much as a form in those days. And a lot of people didn't worry about them. We found Gold Bros one day 100-1 in the Silver Slipper first starting a race. And there was a number of other horses throughout the years that, you're able to land on and have a good win on.
And are the trials still a big part of your punting these days?
They are, but they're not even pulled up now and someone's tweeting how well something's trialled. So it's a completely different ball game now to what it used to be in the old days.
And I know, like all punters, you're going to keep your secrets pretty close to your chest, but can you give us a very basic idea of what punters should look for in trials?
Well, look, I think you just got to go back and see if something's won a trial and then raced, just go back and have a look at what it did. And what you were looking for is probably seeing if they were necked out the back. I don't really like leaders in trials. I think they're a little bit flattered in those short trials. But it's not a hard and fast rule. A lot of it's gut feeling, really.
And just experience of watching them over and over again. Yeah. So if we move on from the Bob Charlie era, I believe you stopped working for Bob Charlie and then you started working for Mark Reed. Mark Reed's almost a mythical character in our game because people love hearing about his story. He was very, verbose and brash back in the day. How did you start working for him?
Well, Bob was retiring, I think. I think he had plenty of real estate investments, so he was, I think he was sweet. So he got me a job with Mark. Yeah. So I was working in the office there. He had card system as well. Yeah. So no internet at that stage. So every horse had a card that we had. It was about 7 or 8 of us doing Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane on the cards. We're going to work at the races. So working 6 days a week. We're at the track Wednesdays and Saturdays and public holidays, and we were in the office mainly the other days. So
I believe the office was at the bottom of Boomerang, which at the time was the most expensive house in Sydney. The
most expensive house in Sydney, and he converted the bottom room into an office, and there was a movie theatre next door to that in the basement of Boomerang.
Was it good times? It sounds like it was pretty good.
It was a bit of fun. Everyone loved a bet in the office. So we had a bit of fun, a bit of luck as well.
Did you roll up the hill to King's Cross and go to the restaurants and the clubs and stuff if you had a good
We
night?
did go to the restaurants. There were some good restaurants around. Even the boys would go up and get a bit of lunch and bring it back. There was some good feeds around up there. Yeah.
And I've heard you also say that when you worked with Mark Reed, the punt was huge. It was enormous. Why was it so big? What about it?
Well, I think there weren't many other options around for punting in those days. You either played the pokies or you bet on the races. Like it's not like it is now. You can bet on just about everything. You know, you're betting on overseas sport. There was none of that. And in Sydney, you just bet on Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane as well. There was no Perth. There was no South Australia. So it was all the markets were. You know, only 3 venues were getting all the money. So it was a completely different pool as well. And big punters were just flocking to Sydney. It was the big ring.
And there'd be all the action always took place in the Sydney ring.
Well, Mark was on interstate for a while, and then he moved to the Sydney ring, and he moved back to interstate. But blokes would fly up from Melbourne even midweek just to bet with the Sydney interstate bookies. To Barry Long and Gary Roberts used to fly in from Melbourne to bet on Ballarat or Bendigo.
They were bookies, were they?
They were punters, big
Punters,
big
right.
punters, massive punters.
And were they
Gary actually bought
professionals
Voe
or they
Road.
just liked to punt?
Professionals.
Yeah.
Barry Long was a death adder.
Yeah.
He pulled off one of the biggest plungers in Australia on Torbeck, and Splinter Roberts was a big punter as well. And as I said, he won enough money to buy Voe Rogue.
Yeah, right. So what happened with Torbeck?
Well, Torbeck was just a big go around Australia. I think it was 33s to nothing, and it was a big go. And there were plenty of big goes in that era.
And so a couple that you might have been involved with Mark Reed, is it Manarick and High Signal? Were they a couple of big goes?
Yeah, Manarick was, I think we were working at Randwick one day, and he said, we're going to Canberra to work tomorrow. And we all said, turn it up, give us one day off. Anyway, we all lobbed there at Boomerang in the morning. And he said, we're not bookmaking today, we're going down to punt. And he had us all standing in different spots. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. He ordered an armoured car with the money, so we got the cash out.
And there's enough bookies down in Canberra to justify.
The ring was massive.
Unbelievable. How many bookies?
Oh, well, there was about 20 on the rails, and there was just bookies everywhere out the back. The Sunday meetings then, bookmaking then was massive.
And what were the limits? Would the bookies have to bet to the limit, or they bet you more than that?
Well, sometimes they'd bet you more. They were just a lot of more fearless bookies in those days. They weren't just saying you're on to win 3 and 5. They're just whatever you like, some blokes. There were a lot of big bookies down in that era, Wagga and all that, who went to that Canberra meeting. So armoured car booked with the cash, flew down on a private jet because he didn't want to go commercial and be seen.
How good.
And armoured car to pick up the money afterwards. So,
and what price was it?
Look, the market got knocked off. I think someone saw us. We didn't probably handle that too well. We got there and we huddled around the corner. I think we were seen. So I think they put 2 and 2 together. I think 7 or 2 or 3s might have been bet into, kiss your ass, so to speak. So.
And what was it that you and Mark liked and the team liked about it so much? Was it one of his horses?
It was the first starter, yeah.
Right, one of his horses?
Yeah, it was
right.
Was in his mother-in-law's name.
Yeah.
And I think it had been transferred from Henry Davis to a bush trainer and put in his name about a couple of weeks before. So it was supposed to look like the horse was trained in the region and just going there for a maiden. But
and it won easy?
Yeah, it shit in.
And how much? What was the result?
Oh, I don't know the
Hundreds
exact
of thousands,
figure, but they were counting the money for a long time.
Yeah. And what about High Signal? What was the story there?
Well, High Signal, Mark was overseas that time, and Robert Burney, who is Nick Burney's father, who's now on Sky Channel, Robert rang me. We were supposed to be on holiday, so we weren't working on the Saturday bookmaking. He said, I need you at Canterbury, so we all turned up there, all got our cash to bet with, and I had part of the outer ring to take the money, which was, I think they bet 5s, maybe 11 to 2. And got the money, first starter as well.
And once again, like Mark Reed owned it and all that.
Mark Reed owned it, it was in his name. That one was in his name, and Greg Hall flew up to it. First starter, but I think the bookies were a little bit shy after getting closer, but still got 5 to 1 or 11 to 2.
Were you working with Mark around the getting closer?
No, period? I was working for Peter Barrett in the outer, actually. Peter Barrett, Porky Barrett was a bookie I used to do running from the paddock into the ledger. He worked in the ledger, so if the price went off, I used to run between the two, because the ledger was actually a strong ring in those days. Jeff Landry was in there, Paul Byrne was in there, and then he graduated into the main paddock ring, and I was working on the ground for him that day, and the money was just untold.
Yeah. And how often did it come off for Mark? Like, more often than not, when he set these first starters and stuff up, did it come off? Was there a few times when it didn't come off?
Not that I can recall,
Wow.
actually. Not to that extent.
Yeah.
They're the only three massive ones that I know, but there might have been others. But yeah, I think that was those three were, but nothing else like it as far as I know.
Yeah. And are you in contact with Mark these days? You
No, I
catch
haven't
up with
spoken to him for years. He
Yeah.
moved back to Melbourne. I was still
Yeah.
doing a little bit of stuff for him for a couple of years, just doing the cards in Sydney, and but then he knocked that on the head, and then of course he moved on from that up to Darwin.
Yeah. And yeah, because I met him for the first time. Actually, I did a podcast with him about a year ago, and it's easily our most popular podcast. People love listening to him and his stories and stuff. So.
Yeah, well, he was well before his time. He
Yeah.
was, like he'd bet anyone, and but he had an opinion as well. Like a lot of bookies in those days would just put a price up and didn't know what round it was, basically. But he had an opinion. He went tens the field one day in a fillies race. I'd never seen anything like it at Randwick. But yeah, it was great working on the ground for him. You know, you'd go and put 5 on this up the back ring, all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah. So I first started the races in 1997, working for Warren Woodcock, and also the Bartholomew boys were working for Warren at the time. And when I got to the race, I was very keen to learn, and I'd ask a lot of questions. And I was put on the ground and just sort of shadowing Sean, basically. And I learned a lot off Sean. And one of the first things Sean said to me was, when you walked in the ring, he was like, "That's Mark Shean. He's a very good judge. Watch him. Let us know if he does anything." Now, what I want to do is turn that around on you.
he must have done his money then.
No, you were one of the better judges in the ring for sure. I remember, but what I want to do is turn that around on you. And when you're in the ring, and you always kept a low profile, you're a pretty humble guy. You sort of stood at the back, watch what was going on. But who were some of the bookies in the ring and the punters in the ring and even the trainers in the ring that you used to watch and be influenced by what they would do?
I don't know if I was influenced by what they did. I sort of watched what punters backed. And certain punters were aligned to certain stables as well, or had a bit of head start in some joints. So you'd obviously keep your eye on that.
Yeah.
But if somebody backed something and I didn't like it, I'd be happy because you knew you'd just wait and you get a better price yourself.
Yeah.
So, but there were so many people at the races who were pro punters or semi-pros in those days that there was so many different opinions.
Yeah.
So I sort of stuck to my own guns, what I liked. I don't think I tried not to be influenced by other people.
Yes.
But I would be. I'd look and see what people back for sure, yeah.
And your selections, was it based off the trials? Was it based off your form? Were you able to price horses?
I did a little bit of markets, but I started doing a lot of sectional times in the early 80s because the only thing you had in those days was they'd give you the last 600 in the overall time. And I remember I was at Canterbury one Wednesday and a thing came from well back. I thought to myself, well, I don't know if the leader stopped or it went like far lap. And I bought a couple of stopwatches, started doing a lot of sectional times myself.
At the races?
Off
the videos?
Just off the videos.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd do them for the trials as well.
Yeah.
And, I did that for a long time. I'm still doing it for the trials myself, actually.
Yeah, and it was really effective?
Well, it helped me get a guide as to the pace of a race, the early pace particularly, and also the finishing speed of the winner. Like a horse can look like they're going through to their one, but as I said, sometimes the leaders are stopping because they've gone too hard early. So it just helped me get a bit of a guide of the race pattern. But a lot of people are buying stuff like that now. They're getting sectional times just to come home, blah, blah, blah. So, and track bias also, I was looking for that in the early 80s. Nobody really spoke about it a lot.
Yeah.
But, I was doing a lot of videos, handwriting videos of every horse. It used to take me about 4 or 5 hours to do each meeting.
Yeah.
I'd just try and do them in a bit of code. But
And you were just doing Sydney or were you doing Melbourne?
I was just doing Sydney. No, I'd bet at the carnivals interstate, but mainly Sydney,
Yeah. And do you find it harder now to back a winner? Is it
Absolutely.
much harder now than it was back in the day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there a particular period when you had your best run? Can you remember when it was?
I think about mid-80s. Oh, look, I was very lucky. I landed on a horse called Marooned before it won the Sydney Cup. It ran third in a welter, first start in Australia. It was an English horse by Mill Reef who came out, Robert Sangster owned it. Anyway, it had its first start at Canterbury on a Saturday in a welter, 15.50, drew the inside barrier, got back, flew home. And I said, this is a machine. You know? So I backed it in the Sydney Cup. I took 3 or 4 horses in the Doncaster.
Doubles?
Doubles.
Yep. Because everyone played doubles back then, didn't they?
Doubles were massive then.
Yeah.
In third place, the Tasmanian Scruples, and here comes Marooned. Marooned on the outside with that big white blaze has charged up, and Maroon has raced to the lead, coming to the 200 mark. Maroon shot away, getting into second place. Wide out now is Amlock and Al Sophia battling on with Fox Seal, but it's all Maroon. There's a fall. Amlock fell in the straights. Amlock fell. Maroon is clear. Al Sophia and Fox Seal won't pick him up, and Maroon wins the cup. Maroon first. Al Sophia.
And I got the double for a lot of money, and it sort of gave me a good bank to get going. And I had a bit of luck with doubles over the years. I didn't take too many, but I was lucky enough to get a few home. So, yeah, they were good.
Set you up somewhat in life. Cool. And just going back to the ring in sort of the 90s, so Sean and Kings, they've obviously been some of the great survivors of the game. They've been hugely successful. They came into the game and they were very different to what your standard punters were, and they had a different way about them. Do you remember when they came, and what was your opinion of them? A lot of people thought that they'd be one-day wonders, come and go because they didn't have what it takes. Do you remember first seeing them and the way they handled themselves?
Well, they were a bit more out in the outer, weren't they? Like I used to go in the members more often than not because I was a member and it was easy to look at the horses actually to be in the members. So, but there were so many people outside ring, you would have known yourself, that the joint was packed, wasn't it? But you would see people backing horses. As I said, you'd look at people and, well, they're a smart judge. They're backing a lot of winners, so you've got to take notice of what they're doing.
Very good. So we move to sort of the more modern day times, and you've had a lot to do with James Harron Bloodstock over nearly the last decade. I think maybe 2015 you started doing some work with him.
Yeah, probably just after TVN finished, James approached me to do a little bit of work with him, just sort of helping out with their horses, maybe just giving an opinion on them.
Yeah.
Some sort of a guide for placing, but I said, I was going to go to Hong Kong. They offered me the job in Hong Kong to call, and the club flew me over there very kindly, but it didn't really grab me the joint.
Did you always think that Hong Kong would be great, or was it never really a burning desire to go to Hong Kong?
No, not at that stage of my life. Maybe if I was 25 or 30 or something, and I'm just sort of starting out. It would have been fantastic, but it didn't work out. Anyway, I was in discussion with James before I went there to have a look at Hong Kong, and anyway, we decided to do something together. He wanted me to do a little bit more than probably I wanted. I still wanted to punt and go to the races. He was a bit more bloodstock stuff. So we were looking for horses to maybe to buy into, maybe to sell to Hong Kong. So that's when actually I suggested that they try and buy into Red Zell early on because he'd won it at Warwick Farm. And then he had a bad season after that. I think he won his first two, and then he had a bad season, and then they gelded him. So there would have been no good. James was looking for stay-in prospects. So as it turned out, they didn't go on with that. But then, of course, he got him in
the Everest.
In the Everest. So, so it was a bit of an association there from the early on. We bought a couple of horses, one that won a Group 2 race in Melbourne, but I sort of backed off from that a little bit and wanted to just mainly go to the races, do my own thing, but still helping him with some of his stuff,
Yeah, and so, because at the moment they're going good, they've got Espionage and Bodyguard in their Colt syndicate, so they wade into the market with their Colt syndicate, a lot of high net worth investors put money in, and they're in the yearling sales trying to get these good horses.
Yeah.
So, and Espionage won the Breeders' Plate, and then you've got Bodyguard who won the Maribyrnong down in Melbourne.
Yeah.
What involvement do you have in those horses from when they're bought at the yearling sales until they race in those races?
Not a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I'm only giving them some barrier trial information. I give them a rundown on their trials, where I think they're at. I give them a review of their races, a pre-race voice memo as well for the owners.
Yep.
And sometimes if we've got older horses as well, they don't just manage that Colt syndicate. They've got other horses there, so I might suggest we go here with that. But the trainers and James have got the final decision on that. I'm only offering an opinion of what I think. Maybe if I owned the horse, I would go do this, do that.
Yeah.
So they don't always listen to me, I can assure you. So it's just some sort of a guide to give them,
But are you moving into your busiest period with James Harron Bloodstock because all the 2-year-olds are coming to their...
Yeah, well, they come along in dribs and drabs too.
Yeah.
Like some are in work and some aren't, and then you've got horses from other years that may have reached their level, and we're trying to maybe sell them to Hong Kong or whatever.
Yeah.
And we're looking to, to try and place them correctly that they can win a race and then go on the market, sort of thing. So that's an important part of it as well. So you've got to try and find the right race for them.
Yeah. And we've been talking a bit in the den lately about how to handle losses. A few of the boys in the den have been getting stripped, and it was a bit of a conversation last week in one of our shows, and it resonated with a lot of people. People like to get a bit of guidance about how to handle it. You're one of the great survivors. How do you handle the bad runs and the losses and stuff?
Yeah, well, I always thought trying to go away on a holiday, but then you think, oh, I'm going to spend 10 on a holiday. That's 10 out of the bank, isn't it?
10 you could have been betting with, yeah.
I tended to work harder, to tell you the truth. I would stay in the office longer and try and do more videos and go back and try and find out what I missed.
Yeah.
That doesn't always work, but I had one horrific run there back in the 90s where I think it rained for about 8 weeks in a row, and there was no poly tracks then. They were just on the grass, and a lot of horses weren't getting enough work, and I was backing things and they were getting flogged.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter what you did. You were just doing your money, So it probably would have been a point where I should have shut up shop, stopped betting, waited till the tracks dried out. But you can't help yourself if... you got to put food on the table, so to speak.
The great game keeps calling.
Yeah.
Did you nearly put yourself out of play in that period?
No,
or?
I still had a bank, but I did a lot of money. I know that.
Did some damage.
Yeah.
Excellent. And to finish off, if you wouldn't mind, can we talk about your favourite horse, jockey and trainer over the years, or the best horse, jockey and trainer? Can I put you on the spot? The best horse you've seen in your time in the great
Best
game?
horse, I'd have to go with the Kingston Towner. I was there through his great era of winning from 6 furlongs to 2 miles. Not many horses do that. I saw a bit of Surround as well. I don't think I'll ever see a 3-year-old filly like that. What she did in her year to win the Caulfield Guineas against the boys, the Cox Plate, the Oaks. She won the Ascot Vale Stakes, which is the equivalent of the Coolmore as well. So she was a freak.
Yeah.
But probably Kingston Towns. But then you're thinking about Winks and Black Caviar as well, so it's hard to discount them either.
Sure. What about best jockey?
There's so many. I did love backing Darren Beedman, though, I must admit. He's a bit more. Peter Cook was as cool as a cucumber. I remember one day I backed this thing from the trials. I thought it was a moral, and he led on it. It was always called Pradnapper.
Is this Peter Cook or Beedman?
Peter Cook.
Yeah.
Neville Voigt trained it. Anyway, it led. And the thing ambled up to it and went about a neck clear, and he was just sitting there, hadn't moved. And I said, what is this bloke doing? And then next week, he just give it one click and away it went. But he was so cool and collected. You never... Great hands and heels. And you saw him on Leilani and horses like that, where he was just... Didn't go for the whip all that often, just the best hands and heels rider you'd ever see. But Beedman was a great jockey. Like, he would do it Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Yeah.
That was the thing. Like, he'd ride 5 on a Wednesday at Canterbury.
He sort of Beedman dominated the game like J-Mac does these days. A lot of similarities there.
But, of course, he was riding for the big stables. He was riding for Hawks and whatever. He had the cattle, but you still had to steer him, didn't you?
Yeah. Best trainer?
Oh, well, I suppose TJ and Bart were, I was coming up through those formative years, though. Absolutely outstanding, but what Waller's doing now will probably put paid to them in time, won't he?
Yeah. Well, Kieran Maher's coming up. Maher and Eustace. Apparently they want to take Waller down, which would be great for racing. So it'd be interesting to see. They're pretty good.
Well, the trouble is, though, that big stables are starting to dominate now, and the small stables are... Look, we saw Tommy Smith used to have 6 and 7 runners, and they thought in those days that they were going to bracket his runners because he had too many runners in a race. It's almost getting to that stage with Waller at stages, but it'll be good to see some new blood with Maher and Eustace coming in more numbers. But you can't rub out the smaller stables as well. It becomes a bit boring.
Yes.
Seeing 1 or 2 trainers win everything, isn't it?
Did you know TJ and Bart at all?
I didn't know Bart at all. I knew TJ a little bit because I used to go to the track in the old days when I was very young. I used to write down the times at the track for Mick O'Brien and Joe Toro. So. I knew Tommy a little bit. Now, I had a horse in the early 90s that he tried to buy off me as well, so I wish he'd bought it because it turned into a mongrel.
Yeah, right.
I won a lot of money on it, but it turned into a mongrel at the finish.
Yeah, interesting. Brilliant, mate. Thank you very much. People really enjoy that. So thanks for coming
Richard.
in.
I appreciate
All
it.
the best over the new year. Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Thank you.